Hi everyone, it's Rebecca here, and today B and I are recording our part 2 of our videos where we're asking each other questions about what it was like. So you may well have seen the one that B recorded asking me questions about what it was like to be a carer when she had an eating disorder. So today it's my turn to ask her the questions that I might not actually have asked her before. Are you ready?
Yep. And just so people know, I have no idea what she's going to ask me, hence why I'm feeling so nervous right now.
It's only me. So I don't know whether you remember this, but when I was thinking about the questions I wanted to ask you, there was one question that kind of jumped out first of all. And it was at a time when you were really poorly, and you just said to me, and I remember because we were having a hug at the time, and you just said to me, Mum, it would be so much easier if I just gave into this. And it absolutely, I can feel the emotion now. It filled me with terror at the time. And I wonder whether you remember that and what was going on for you at that point.
Yeah, I do remember it. And it was really scary around that time. Like my memory, as we kind of talked about before, my memory from when I was ill is quite patchy. I don't know why, but I do remember that, and I do remember it constantly feeling like a kind of an uphill battle to fend off the eating disorder voice, as it were. And so yeah, it did feel like it would be easier to just give into it because it was so overwhelming and I didn't feel like I could cope. I didn't feel like I had the energy and sometimes the will to just keep fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting because it was knackering. As I'm sure you remember, it was waking up in the morning and going straight into that fight, because most of the time I didn't want those thoughts there. Sometimes I did. Sometimes I found it reassuring and comforting, and I knew that I was good at it. But then most of the time when I kind of went into that recovery period, I was really determined to recover, but it was really hard. It was really hard, and so that's why sometimes it just felt like it was too much, and that it would be easier just to kind of obey the thoughts in my head because they were so loud and so convincing and so persuasive that to me at that time it felt like that was the easiest route, because at that time I didn't know that I didn't have to believe that, and I didn't know that it didn't have to be such a struggle. So yes, I absolutely remember that.
Thank you. So the next question I've got is about the time that I had to play bad cop. And I know that we've spoken a lot about, you know, you saw me as the kind of, well, prison guard. Okay, so I just wonder, when I was having to play the bad cop, what was that like for you? Did you know that underneath all of that why I was doing it, or was it? Well, you tell me. What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't very fun because I mean we've had like before the eating disorder we had a good relationship. I don't think it was necessarily as strong as it is now, but we got on. And so when you had to kind of change that role from being what felt like on my side beforehand to not being on my side, that I found really tough. It felt like kind of a betrayal almost, and that you were taking the sides of the doctors and the medical professionals because you were the one who was weighing out my cereal in the morning. You were the one who was making me eat my snack at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So yeah, it felt really tough, but at the same time I knew why you were doing it. I never doubted that you were acting in my best interests, even though I didn't agree with that. Even though I didn't want to eat that snack, or I didn't want to eat that much of whatever it is you're weighing out. So yeah, it was, I found it really frustrating, and I resented you a lot for having to play that role. But it was the role rather than you. So it's almost like I was playing the role of the person with anorexia, and you were playing the role of this prison guard. But actually, like, we still had those moments when the roles disappeared and it was just us. And that was in those moments where I was totally vulnerable, and I think you were vulnerable as well. That's when we were able to connect and actually talk about what was going on. I think when we're in the depths of it, those were pretty fleeting, and sometimes we only got glimpses of that. But I think also, just thinking about it now, that it must have been really hard for you to be able to let your guard down, because I was so tricksy and was always trying to find a way around the rules. And so actually it must have been really hard actually stepping away from that role, as it was hard for me to kind of be able to step away from mine. I think obviously they're slightly different. I don't think you were being kind of controlled by yours, but it's almost like those two masks were up a lot of the time, and they were going like that a lot of the time. So yeah, that's my kind of experience of it.
That is such a rich area for conversation, isn't it? You know, it's like, as you said, it's the couple of things that you said there about vulnerability, and if people watching haven't read anything by Brené Brown, then go to her straight away, because she is amazing on what she talks about vulnerability. And she talks about it as in her words, the birthplace of creativity. But for me, I see, well, yeah, creativity not in the kind of arty way, but creativity of creation, of real dialogue, conversation, of who we really are. And I absolutely love what you've said there about the two of us with our masks, having that kind of battle in a way. But that what I love is that you were, even when you were in that, you were able to separate out the who I was really, and the role I was playing, because you saw that in yourself as well, because otherwise you wouldn't have been able to connect with that. And I think, you know, when you and I talk about seeing the health behind it, that was it. So even in the depths of this space of eating disorder, you were able to see that I was coming from a place of love, even if it was kind of a momentary thing. You could see that, and that's hope. So, oh gosh, yeah, I think we could talk about that for a long time. So, the third question I've got, which you kind of answered in the first, but I'd like to know if you've got any more to say on that, is about, were you ever really scared
Yeah, I think fear is a big one. I think I was scared about different things at different times. Um, at times I was fearful of what would happen if I did just give in to the eating disorder. But then at times I was really fearful of what recovery would be like and what was on the other side. And I've talked a fair bit in the past, and if you haven't already, have a watch of the video that's on our channel about who I am without my eating disorder, because I think that's a question that's come up a lot when I've spoken to other people who are going through it. And for me, that was a real fear as well, because the eating disorder was my whole identity. That's what it seemed like at the time anyway. And so actually trying to imagine what life would be like without it was really scary, because I didn't know that I didn't believe that I could do anything else, or anything else as good as I was doing kind of the eating disorder. So it was kind of a mix of different kind of almost conflicting fears um, that I experienced at the time. Um, yeah, I think having spoken to other people about it, that it's a similar thing, that when we're in that mindset that we really do want to recover, it can still feel really scary. Um, yeah, so I think it kind of evolves over time, and then can kind of flit from one thing to another. Like I was certainly, like, within the space of an hour I could be really wanting to recover, and then the next kind of within a few minutes I could be kind of completely on the other side. But I think it's just like allowing yourself to feel those feelings without being afraid of them. And like we were talking the other night about being afraid of being afraid, or being scared of feeling scared. And but actually it's okay to feel everything. And I think I was really fearful of my emotions at the time, and showing them, and particularly showing them to anyone else, because I saw it as a huge kind of vulnerability. And that actually, if I did show emotions, then you would see these kind of cracks in my armor, as it were. So I bottled it all up because I didn't want to show any weakness. Um, but I think if I'd maybe known that it was okay to feel all those things, even in private, and not be afraid of that experience, then I think that would have made it maybe more bearable, or less of a scary experience.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask, kind of within this question, was about what do you see differently about fear now that would have helped then? But you've kind of answered that, really. But yeah. So another question, I've got two more questions. Another question was kind of around food, but you loved cooking. You watched every single cooking show that was available back then. So it was, the sense that I got was that you were getting your nourishment, as it were, from cooking and from watching the TV, watching the things. What was that like? Because I get the sense that you loved food.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was totally obsessed with it. And I think anyone who says that someone with an eating disorder doesn't like food hasn't got a clue, basically. Because I was totally obsessed with it. I was obsessed with the smells, how it looked, the kind of the whole preparation process, even just kind of being in a supermarket and being surrounded by it. So yes, I would spend a lot of time watching cookery shows. I don't know if it was, I don't think it was even a conscious decision, like I'm not going to eat it, but I will allow myself, I'll kind of indulge myself by watching all the stuff and reading all the books. It was just this kind of fascination almost with it. And I think it was, again, subconsciously my way of getting that fix without actually having to ingest it. And I think also, like, when, I don't know, when you, because I mean I would cook as well, wouldn't I? But then it was just kind of when it came to eating that I wouldn't do it. And I think, like, sometimes when you spend the whole day cooking, you're almost kind of not even hungry by the end of it. I think that goes for anyone. So I think I was, subconsciously surrounding myself with it because I wasn't allowing myself to actually physically eat it. But I think it was very much a subconscious thing at the time. But yeah, it was just, I mean, I still love flicking through cookbooks, and I'm not quite as obsessed with the cookery programs anymore. But yeah, I don't know, I was just fascinated by it. And I mean, it's a beautiful thing, just kind of looking through cookbooks, and then when you're cooking, it's kind of creating something. But yeah, it was something then at the end of that process that would stop me. It was like I had my fill by that point. So yeah.
That was the thing.
Well, yeah.
So my last question is, so we've talked about, you know, the first phase of you having eating disorder, and then you became weight restored and went off to university, etc., but then managed it for quite a few years, until maybe I don't even know how long it is, 2.5 years maybe now, where you saw something completely different that then took you from in recovery to recovered. But if I take you back to the kind of the first phase, if you like, and we'd be in and out of seeing every therapist and counsellor, etc., etc., etc. And then we met somebody called Elizabeth, who was a counsellor. What was it that kind of almost kick-started that shift from being really poorly to able to function again, if that makes sense?
That's a good question. I think it was like two things bring to mind. One, it was someone who was outside of the system, as it were. It was someone who wasn't interested in how much I was eating, and who wasn't kind of involved either within the family or wasn't part of the medical team. So I think that was important. And then also the second thing, which I think is the most important thing, is that we didn't talk about food. We talked about, and actually I remember, I mean, God, it was years ago now, but I remember so clearly a conversation we had, and I'd say with a kind of a pad of paper, because was she an art therapist or?
Yes, play therapist, art therapist.
Yeah. And so we'd kind of sit at the table together, and there'd be a pad of paper in front of me. She wouldn't kind of make me draw or anything, but it was just there, and some pens in case I felt the need to draw something. And we were having a conversation about moods, and I was saying that I find that I spiral really quickly, or I found that anyway, that I spiraled really quickly. If something kind of triggered me to go off on one, whether it was mum making me eat something or someone said something or whatever, then that would make me literally just spiral, because what I didn't know at the time is that I was reading so much into what that person has said or done, and then created a whole story around it, which then kind of tied me in knots, and I couldn't see a way out, which is then when I found myself at the bottom of this rabbit hole that was really horrible and dark and scary. But I remember a conversation we had when I was drawing this spiral on a piece of paper, and Elizabeth said to me, so I drew this kind of big spiral, and talking her through what it was like just to go kind of round and round and down and down and down. And she said something like, right at the start of the spiral and slightly round the first corner, she said something like, what if you were able to catch yourself there before you went any further? And I don't know, I don't really remember many of our conversations from that time, because like I said, it was ages ago. But those kind of conversations I found were really helpful, because it wasn't about how much I was eating or trying to force myself to just follow the meal plan, or just to stop or to sit on my hands so I didn't over exercise and white knuckle my way through recovery, which is kind of what the medical team were telling me to do. And yeah, like obviously that's going to be really hard, because it's a horrible thing to have to do, to force yourself to do something. But so what I found really helpful about those kind of separate conversations was that it wasn't about any of that. It was about looking at what's actually going on, like within me. And I mean, I guess we were kind of talking a bit about what was going on psychologically and what was going on in my thinking, but conversations like that about kind of catching myself before I end up at the bottom of this hole, I mean, clearly it stuck with me, because it's however many years later. So I think, yeah, it was really helpful that she wasn't part of that team, but just helping me see things from a different perspective, I think, was hugely helpful. And actually it just goes to show that like eating disorders aren't about food. Which I think people lose sight of. And yes, of course, it's important that we're at a healthy weight, because we need to function. But actually, when all the focus is on that, and what you ate that day, and keeping a food diary, and following a meal plan, and going in for your weekly weigh-ins and all that kind of stuff, if it's just that, I think it's really hard. And it's really hard I've certainly found that before I started seeing someone else, I found that just doing those things that were focused on food, it was almost like you're missing the point. So I think it is hugely helpful to be able to speak to someone who's a kind of independent, I mean, even if it's a member of your, not even member of your family, but even if a kind of a friend of a friend, or it doesn't have to be a counselor or whatever, it's just, yeah, I think helping to see something from a different perspective, I found was really helpful.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting, so helpful. So I'm just wondering if there's any question that you'd like me to ask.
Not that I can think of, but actually, if anyone watching has any questions that, whether you're a carer or you have an eating disorder, that you would like us to kind of do this again with those questions, then just either contact us or drop a comment below. And make sure you watch the other video that we did when I was grilling mum. But I hope you found this helpful. I think it's been quite fun. We've quite enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And yeah, check out our other videos on our channel, and make sure you subscribe as well, so you get notifications when we post our new videos. We post new videos between kind of, at the moment we're posting 2 a week, sometimes 1 a week. So plenty of content to keep you occupied. Anyway, speak soon.